Let's do a couple of thought questions here to review what we covered in that last video. So here's a scenario. You're talking with a landowner and they're asking you for feedback on a fertilizer prescription for her pine plantation. And she's noticed deficiency symptoms in older foliage on those trees. And she's thinking she needs to add calcium in the next fertilizer application. So what's your advice? Go for it. That's a great idea. Or that's not so great an idea. Let me talk with you about why. Is that prescription of calcium for that deficiency symptoms on old foliage a good idea or not? Yeah, it's not a good idea because deficiency symptoms on older foliage tend to indicate deficiency in a mobile element. Like potassium. We know that calcium is immobile, so calcium deficiency symptoms would tend to show up on newer foliage. So we can probably eliminate calcium. Now, determining what other elements might be deficient, probably need to do nutrient analysis on that foliage. But at any rate, we can probably eliminate calcium in this case. Here's another one, the element iron. It's a multiple choice question. The element iron is a macronutrient. Is iron a macronutrient? Yes, iron is a macronutrient. Is more readily available to plants at acidic soil pH? Yes, it is. Okay. Is an important component of cell walls? No. That's calcium. Calcium is an important component of cell walls. Now, both iron and calcium are immobile, but iron is for other reasons. So iron is a macronutrient that's more readily available at acidic soil pH. This slide and these bullets really interface with really more with soil, the soils class that you should take or will take in the future. And that's related to sort of three main mechanisms of movement of mineral elements to roots. And there's sort of three general classes of mechanisms of movement. One is mass flow. Mass flow is just when elements are dissolved in the soil solution, in the soil water, and move with the soil solution into the roots. So elements move with soil solution to roots. Most elements, mass flow is important. Now, with diffusion, this is basically diffusion plus mass flow. So some elements, in addition to mass flow, some elements also must diffuse through the soil solution to the roots. So phosphorus and potassium, this is generally true that they require diffusion in addition to mass flow. And then there's some immobile elements where the roots actually have to grow to those elements to encounter them. So phosphorus and calcium are dependent to some extent on interception, so roots growing to new locations in the soil profile to encounter those elements. So that's a very quick overview of those three mechanisms, and you will have learned or will learn more about those in your soils class. So how do those elements get into the tree? So again, generally they're taken up with the soil solution. So either apoplastically or symplastically, uptake of soil solution. So they're getting the nutrients in the soil solution. Of course, at the Casparian strip or the endodermis causes that flow to go symplastic. So we learned about that when we learned about root morphology. And then xylem transport to the leaves. Okay, so those nutrients are moving in the water in the xylem stream up to the leaves, and then they end up in the cell walls of leaf mesophyll cells. So they're not in the cells themselves when that solution arrives at the leaves. And one thing that's important for this is that some of those nutrients can actually leak out of the leaves. So, for instance, if you measure throughfall, rain that's gone through the forest canopy and over leaves, and you collect that throughfall will have more mineral elements in it than, for instance, pure rainwater, because that rain coming down through the leaves actually washes some mineral elements off of and out of leaves. So there's some leakage because those mineral elements are not contained in cells yet. And then, so from that cell wall, there has to be active uptake. Of minerals by the cells in the leaves. Okay, so that's how the initial uptake and transport of nutrients occurs. All right, so we have the elements in the tree. How do those elements move around within the tree? Now, clearly, we already talked about uptake of soil solution and minerals in the xylem. So mineral elements move with the xylem water, but that's not the only mechanism. If xylem was the only way that minerals moved around, then all the elements would accumulate in the leaves and wouldn't be able to go anywhere else. But we know that nutrients move around within the tree. So they move around in the tree via the phloem. So those mineral elements also can get loaded into the phloem and move around with sugars to different locations. And that provides a mechanism basically for moving mineral elements through the phloem to places, for instance, where rapid growth is occurring, because those are strong sinks for carbohydrates. So essentially those strong sinks, remember, pull carbohydrates toward them, and then also will pull mineral elements toward them as well. So mineral elements move around in trees, both in the xylem and in the phloem.